This remarkable woman overcame abandonment, poverty, and harsh prejudice with a strength that seems almost beyond belief. Her journey is just one of countless untold stories. From the generation of our grandparents drew accounts of warriors who challenged destiny and reshaped their futures. Each of these narratives serves as a compelling reminder that it's never too late to begin anew, and that the heroes we seek are often closer than we think. Don't miss the opportunity to be inspired. Subscribe to the channel now. Hit the notification bell and give us your like to show your support. "Gwen, we're all ears," they said. "I feel strong now, and I have this deep urge to share a bit of my story with you." At 77, I find myself reflecting on the years that have passed. For so long, my hands were busy giving life to countless sewn pieces until the day I retired. Even now, I still sew a little, though it's more out of enjoyment than necessity. I grew up in a tiny town, so small that when I close my eyes, I can still smell the earth, damp from the rain. I was the middle child, nestled between my brother Sawyer and my sister Willa. Our lives were simple on the small piece of land my mother inherited, a patch of earth that, to us, felt like the whole world. My mother Loretta, oh, she was the sweetest soul. She had a soft voice and a smile always ready, a constant warmth. My father August, on the other hand, was one of those old-fashioned men. Tough, strict, his word was law. Let me tell you about our life on that land, dear. Though it was small, it was our slice of heaven. Each morning, I'd wake up to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of freshly brewed coffee, made by Mother with such care. Breakfast was a true treat. Homemade sourdough bread, fresh from the oven, and jam made from the fruit we grew ourselves. I loved climbing the cherry trees. I'd sit up there, munching on fresh cherries, watching the world go by, and the streamo, how sweet it was to swim in that cool water on hot summer days. We'd lose ourselves in the current, playing for hours. When I wasn't playing, I was helping Mother with her sewing. She taught me the art of needle and thread. Using the leftover fabric scraps, I'd make doll clothes, mend socks, and patch holes in pockets. When night fell, that was pure magic. We'd gather on the porch as the old railroad lantern flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Our very own television, back then. That soft yellow light gave everything a mystical glow. Despite his tough demeanor, Father would soften, telling stories of his youth. His eyes would light up as he reminisced about his adventures and youthful mischief. But when Mother began her stories, well, that was something else. She had this special way of telling eerie tales of wandering souls, werewolves, and the woman in white who appeared on the road. She told them with such conviction, I could swear I saw those ghosts right in our own yard. I'd tremble, clutching Willa's arm, but couldn't tear my eyes away from Mother. Later in bed, I'd pray quietly, scared that something might come for me. But you know what's funny? The next day, there we were, my siblings and I, asking, "Mother, tell us another ghost story." It was always like that, fear, turning into bravery with the morning light. We didn't have much, but who needs wealth when you have a childhood full of adventures? I can still see it, me siblings and I, balancing on tree branches, reaching for the ripest fruit, our bare feet running through the grass, and diving into the stream that ran through our land. That cool water washed away all our worries. These memories are so vivid, sometimes it feels like it happened just yesterday. But not everything was perfect, my dear. Back then, parents often married off their daughters young. I think it was a way to cut down on expenses, considering our financial struggles. Well, my turn came at 16. My father arranged a marriage for me with a young man from another town. His name was Flint. He wasn't from our village and wasn't well known in the area. He was a smooth talker, one of those people who could make friends wherever he went. He was also quite handsome, with black hair and brown eyes. But to my father, that didn't matter. What mattered was that he was committed to marriage. And so, in an intimate ceremony, in a charming little church in town, we sealed our union. We decided to build our life in a neighboring town, a charming place known for its strong Norwegian heritage and its prosperous cattle industry. The move happened because of the opportunity that arose for Flint to work with cattle breeding, his area of expertise. Life seemed to be conspiring in our favor. In just a short time, only months after the wedding, we discovered we were expecting our first child. The happiness was complete. Until that rainy afternoon that would change everything. Flint came home with unexpected news. "I need to travel," he said, avoiding my gaze. "What do you mean, travel? So suddenly?" I questioned, feeling a tightness in my chest. The idea of being alone, especially while pregnant, made me apprehensive. "It's to resolve some problems," he replied, trying to reassure me. "I'll be back in 2 days at most." The hours dragged on as if they were years, and every noise on the street made me run to the window, hoping to see Flint returning. But he never came back. The days turned into weeks, the weeks turned into months, and the only things growing were my belly and my desperation. When the money began to dwindle, I opened the kitchen cabinet and saw only a few cans of oil and a handful of rice. It was there, looking at those nearly empty shelves, that reality hit me. I was completely alone. With a broken heart and trembling hands, I gathered what little I had in a few bundles and made my way back to my parents' house. Returning to my parents' home meant swallowing my pride along with my tears. In those days, my God, a pregnant and abandoned woman was seen as a disgrace, a scandal. I remember the looks of the neighbors whispering in corners and the sharp tongues that didn't forgive. Each whisper was like a stab wound. I'll never forget my father's face when he saw me at the door, pregnant and helpless. His face turned red with anger, his fists clenched, and he muttered through his teeth, "What a scoundrel! What a big scoundrel!" Poor old man. His impotence was visible. A simple man without education, without money, without knowledge of the laws. What could he do against someone who simply disappeared into the world? Mother, even with her heart broken seeing me in that situation, silently prepared my old room. There was no other way. I was their daughter, carrying their grandchild in my womb. Between looks of disapproval and sighs of concern, I was welcomed back to the nest, even though my wings were damaged. And then came Phoenix, my little princess with brown eyes. Oh, how that little girl changed our lives. It was just her smile that lit up the whole house. Everyone melted over her. Even my father, with all his toughness, turned to butter when she called him Grandpa. 2 years later, I was walking in the central square with Phoenix when I got distracted for a second, and she ran toward the street. I ran, shouting, "Phoenix! Phoenix! Wait for Mommy!" Suddenly, a man picked her up. "Where are you going, young lady?" "Wait for Mommy." When I got close to pick up Phoenix, my heart almost stopped. There stood the most handsome man I had ever seen in my entire life, blonde with eyes so blue they looked like 2 little pieces of the summer sky. "Thank you," I said, still breathless from running. "It's nothing," he replied with a kind smile. "Let's sit on that little bench over there." Well, he had saved my little girl. How could I refuse? We sat down and he quickly introduced himself. "Pleased to meet you. My name is Beckett, and you, ma'am, what's your name?" "Gwen," I answered, feeling my face burn. I'm sure I was red as a pepper. Imagine, a simple girl like me talking with such a handsome and polite man. The hours passed without us noticing. Beckett told me he was passing through, that he was a long-haul trucker specializing in refrigerated goods. Oh, how proudly he spoke of his Peterbilt 389. In those days, that truck was the most modern thing around. You know, his eyes sparkled when he talked about his travels, the roads. And I don't even know exactly how it happened, but I found myself telling him my whole story, about Phoenix, about being a single mother, about everything. It seems strange now, but I was so engaged in the conversation that the words came out naturally. The most curious thing is that he didn't make a face or change the way he treated me when he learned about my situation. On the contrary, he listened to me with such interest and understanding that I even forgot my worries. It was like those love stories that you only see in movies, you know? That meeting that seems like it was written in the stars. When he said he needed to leave the next day. I'll stop here as the excerpt ends. This is the translation of the first portion of the story, with all the requested name changes and adaptations incorporated. To finish a trip, I felt a tightness in my chest, but he completed his thought, giving me hope. Maybe I'll come back next week. That night, when I was putting Phoenix to bed, I caught myself thinking about that man from the square, how polite and kind he was, and of course, very handsome too. The next day, I got up all excited, did my chores, and when it was time to prepare lunch, I decided to tell my mother. At first, she was very angry with me for entertaining a stranger, especially a traveler. "My daughter," she said very angrily. But after I told her that he saved Phoenix and didn't mind that I had a daughter, my mother began to reconsider and said it was hard to find someone like that these days, and even started to support me. After all, she didn't want her daughter to be a single mother forever. The week that followed was pure anticipation. I caught myself wondering if he would really come back as he had promised. Was he as interested as he seemed? While taking care of Phoenix and doing my sewing, these thoughts wouldn't leave my mind. When the day of his possible return arrived, I felt butterflies in my stomach. I went back to the square with Phoenix, full of expectation, and to my joy, there he was with that easy smile and welcoming look. We talked again as if we were old friends. He told me more about his travels, and I shared more about my life. He asked me to call him Beck. Over time, our meetings became more frequent. What began as a friendship transformed into something deeper. He wasn't just interested in me, but also in Phoenix, showing himself to be a friend and an important support in our lives. And so the days went by. These moments with Beck brought new challenges and choices to my life, but along came so much happiness and the hope of having a real family. Life followed its course until one day I couldn't believe Ith appeared at home all excited, barely containing his anxiety. He said he needed to talk to my parents. I, already imagining what it was about, quickly took him home. He had barely finished greeting my parents when Beck went straight to the point, like someone who couldn't wait another second. "I've come to ask for Gwen's hand in courtship," he said with a firmness in his voice that made me tremble inside. I was so nervous that I could barely look at my parents' faces. "What are your intentions with my daughter?" Father asked with that seriousness that only he knew how to convey. Beckett responded immediately, but Father soon interrupted him. "Beckett, I need to be honest. My daughter is still married on paper. That shameless man disappeared, but the law is the law." It was a difficult moment. Beck was silent for a few moments, then said, "Mr. August, I already knew about this situation. I know I can't marry your daughter for now, but I want to do everything right. I'll help resolve this situation, no matter how long it takes. For now, I ask your permission to court her with respect, to take care of her and Phoenix." Father scratched his chin, worried. In those days, it wasn't easy. A separated woman already suffered so much prejudice. Imagine one who wasn't even legally divorced yet. But Beck seemed so determined, so sincere in his intentions. "You have my word that I will do everything within the law, with respect. As soon as possible, I want to do everything properly." Beck completed with a seriousness that made me even more certain he was different. There I was, pressing my hands together, holding myself back from jumping like a little girl. You know when you want to scream with joy but have to maintain your composure? That's how I was feeling. After everything I went through with Flint, the one who abandoned me pregnant without looking back, it seemed like a lie to be experiencing something so beautiful and true. It was as if God had given me a gift, a new chance to believe in love. Beck didn't care about my past. He didn't see Phoenix as an impediment. On the contrary, he treated my little one with such care that sometimes I would find myself emotional just seeing the two of them together. There in that simple room in my parents' house, I felt that life was showing me that there were still real men out there, those who take on responsibilities and make plans for the future. It was a dream, yes, but a dream I could touch with my hands. My parents, seeing Beck's sincerity, ended up giving their blessing. It was a relief to see that they also saw in him the good man that I saw. Our life began to take on new colors with him, coming to visit me whenever he could between his trips. Phoenix became so attached to Beck, her little eyes would shine when he arrived, and she would quickly run into his arms, shouting, "Uncle Beck!" He had a special way with her, always bringing some little surprise from his Tripsa doll here, a little treat there. One evening, while we were preparing dinner, he surprised me. "Gwen, I rented a wooden house in my town, close to my mother's house. What do you think about us moving in together?" I accepted right away. I was eager to start a new life, away from the neighbors' gossip. My parents didn't try to prevent it either, because they knew my desire to build a family. Beck had 3 brothers, Thatcher, Porter, and Ellis, all married and living in the same town, and his mother, Miss Imogene, had been a widow for some years. The house was a beauty, all made of hardwood, with a long porch in front where I already imagined myself sitting on Sunday afternoons. The floorboards creaked a little, but it was a cozy sound that I soon learned to love. It had 2 large bedrooms, a spacious living room with windows that let in that pleasant morning light, and a kitchen that I quickly made my own. The yard was wonderful. It had enough space for me to plant flowers and vegetables. 6 months after we moved in, Beck came home with wonderful news. "Gwen, I've been saving every penny from my long trips. We can now buy this house from Miss Marta instead of just renting it. Gwen, I've been saving every penny from my long trips. We can now buy this house from Miss Marta instead of just renting it." I couldn't believe my ears. We were going to be homeowners. We signed the papers the following week, and I felt such pride knowing this beautiful wooden house was truly ours. I planted a bit of everything: kale, lettuce, chives, even some flowers to brighten things up. I even made a special bed with herbs that Phoenix helped me take care of. But not everything was rosy. At the beginning, Miss Imogene, my mother-in-law, hadn't taken well to the story of her son moving in with a single mother. "My son had so many proper girls around here," she would constantly mutter. She was fierce as a mountain lion, that old lady, one of those traditional types who didn't forgive what they called mistakes. Beck's brothers and their wives treated me well in front of him, but there was always that sideways glance when he was traveling. Thatcher, the oldest, lived in a large house owned by the local Lutheran church with Maeve and their 3 children. Porter owned a farm supply store in the center of town where he worked with his wife, Juniper. Ellis, the youngest, was an agricultural science teacher and had married Briar, the pharmacist's daughter. Porter owned a farm supply store in the center of town where he worked with his wife, Juniper. Ellis, the youngest, was an agricultural science teacher and had married Briar, the pharmacist's daughter. They all had their established lives there, and I was the intruder who had arrived with a child. Beck worked as a long-haul trucker, specializing in refrigerated goods, spending days on the road with his truck, which he cared for as if it were a child. On lonely nights, I would sit on the porch looking at the stars, feeling that cool breeze, praying quietly to St. Christopher to watch over his safety. Phoenix already recognized the sound of the engine and would run to the door shouting, "Daddy's home!" That's how she called him, with all the love in the world. When he arrived, it was a celebration. He always brought some surprise for Phoenix, a little gift for me, and that smile that had won me over from the first day. Our intimacy was full of affection and respect. Beck had a special way of making me feel loved, even with all the simplicity. Sometimes it was just a hug after a tiring day. Other times, a stolen kiss while I was sewing. It was during one of my trips to the Notion store that I saw a used Husqvarna Viking sewing machine for sale, beautiful, black with golden details, one of those with an iron pedal. I waited for him to return from a trip and prepared a slow-cooked brisket that he loved, with roasted vegetables and wild rice, just the way he liked it. "Beck, I want a Husqvarna Viking," I blurted out suddenly during lunch. "What the heck is a Husqvarna Viking?" he asked with that country manner that charmed me. "A sewing machine. There's a beautiful one at the second-hand store." The next day, he took me to see it. It was a bit scratched, but nothing that some varnish wouldn't fix. We bought it on the spot and took it in his truck. I spent the whole day cleaning it, and Beck gave the wooden cabinet a coat of varnish. It turned out beautifully. Soon the news that I had a Husqvarna Viking spread. The women in town began to seek me out for alterations, simple dresses, hems, refashioning, even Miss Times and Ada Van. Imogene surprised me one day by asking me to hem her Sunday dress. That's how I started earning my own little money, and more importantly, I was gaining my place in that town. On Sundays, we would all go to church. Afterward, it was customary to gather the whole family for lunch. At first, it was a bit awkward, but over time, I learned to deal with Miss Imogene's tough ways. The sisters-in-law also began to warm up to me, especially after they saw my skill with sewing. Life was settling down like that, slowly. The wooden house became our true home, filled with love and the soft sound of the Husqvarna Viking. Phoenix grew up happy, calling Beck Dad, and even Miss Imogene, seeing our love and dedication, gradually softened that heart of hers. It was a simple life, but rich in love and joy, the kind that makes you look back and just be grateful. One morning, while I was sewing a dress for a neighbor, Phoenix came running to me. "Mommy, Mommy, can I help?" She was so enthusiastic that I couldn't resist. I showed her some basic stitches, and little by little, she began to get the hang of it. Seeing my daughter interested in sewing filled me with pride and joy, as it reminded me of my dear mother Loretta, who taught me my first stitches on Father's socks. One day, Beck arrived with a smile on his face and a package in his hands. "I brought something special for you," he said, handing me the package. I opened it carefully and found a wonderful fabric with a vibrant color and soft texture. "I thought you could make something beautiful with this," he said with a gleam in his eyes. I thanked him with a tight hug and promised I would make something special. I spent the following days working on the fabric, creating a dress that reflected all the love and dedication he had put into choosing that gift. When I finished, I showed it to him, and his eyes filled with pride. "You have an incredible talent, Gwen," he said, hugging me. Our life was simple but full of special moments. The festivals in the square, the church gatherings, and friends' visits were part of our daily life. Phoenix was very happy with school and her teachers. One day, while we were sitting on the porch after dinner, feeling that pleasant night breeze, Beck looked at me with that playful way of his and said, "It's almost time." I was curious, and he continued, "I'm almost gathering all the money from our savings to buy Miss Marta's house. I've already made an offer to her. I wanted to surprise you, but I can't keep this secret any longer." My heart raced. The idea of having our own house, that wooden house that we already considered our home, left me on cloud 9. Beck, all excited, began to make plans. "By Christmas we'll manage it, you'll see. And look, I had an idea. We'll add a separate room to the house, with a bathroom and everything, for you to make your studio." I was speechless. A space just for my sewing would be a dream. I could already imagine my Husqvarna Viking installed with plenty of light, shelves to organize the fabrics, a large table to cut the patterns. Beck continued talking, gesturing with his calloused hands from holding the truck's steering wheel so much. "It's going to be really good, you'll see. I insist on building it with my own hands on my days off." Said and done, but it wasn't before Christmas as we had planned. Half a year later is when everything materialized, and look, it was much more than I could dream of. The house was simple, but it was ours. I still remember the smell of the house, of the new curtains that I sewed myself. 2 years later, I discovered I was pregnant. Beck, oh my child, was like a kid himself. Every day he came home from work and would put his hand on my belly, talking to the baby. "Is it a little Beck or a little Gwen?" he would speculate with that big smile on his face. The pregnancy was a special phase for the whole family. Phoenix, now 8 years old, was excited about the idea of having a little brother or sister. She helped me with everything, from household chores to activities in the studio. Beck, always affectionate and attentive, made a point of pampering me and taking care of me. The months flew by, and soon came the day to give birth. We went to the hospital, and after a few hours of labor, our little one was born. He was a healthy baby, full of life, and brought even more joy to our home. We named him Archer. Archie was beautiful, bald, with blue eyes just like his father's. 2 more years passed, and our life took a turn that I could never have imagined. Miss Lavinia's family was wonderful. In the first few days, when she saw my concern about Archie, she told me, "Don't worry. My cousin Willow works at a municipal daycare nearby." Our life was beautiful for several years, but slowly, things started to change. At first, Beck would come home and go straight to bed, saying it was just fatigue from the road. The trips became longer, and he more impatient. That sweet man I knew, who played with Phoenix and hugged me on the porch, was transforming into a stranger with a closed face. When he arrived, he barely looked at the food I left ready, warming on the stove. The smell of whiskey grew stronger and the excuses weaker. My woman's heart already knew something was wrong. You know how it is, right? We feel it. That caring Beck who brought me small gifts from his trips and told stories to Phoenix before bed was slowly disappearing. In his place remained an irritated man who responded curtly and was always complaining about everything. I tried to understand. I told myself it was the weight of responsibility, the fatigue from the roads, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. Sometimes I would catch him staring at nothing in a different way, as if he were somewhere else, thinking of another life. Days went by, and the situation only got worse. Beck now practically lived at Mr. Juvenal's bar. He would come home staggering late at night with that strong smell of whiskey that tied my stomach in knots. When I tried to talk to him, he would change the subject. "I'm just tired, Gwen. I need to relax," he would say with a slurred voice, but I no longer swallowed those excuses. Phoenix, who spent more time at home because of school vacations, noticed the change in her father right away. One night, she came to me with teary eyes. "Mom, what happened to Dad? He doesn't seem like the same person he used to be." That broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. How do you explain to a daughter that her father had lost himself to drink? Soon we began to fear him. I never imagined that one day I would tremble at the sound of Beck's footsteps coming home. When he lost his trucking job because who would trust a truck to a drunk, things completely fell apart. With no money for whiskey, he began to take money from my sewing earnings. "Beck, for the love of God, that money is to pay the electric bill," I would beg, but it was like talking to a wall. He would take the money and go straight out the door, directly to the bar. To this day, my child, when I pass in front of a bar, I feel a tightness in my chest and an anger I can't even describe. He would come home and break things, talk loudly, rudely, ignorantly. That's when I made the most difficult decision of my life. How could I continue living with a man who had transformed into a stranger? That caring, hard-working Beck who had given me a new chance at life had disappeared. In his place remained an addicted man who spent everything on drink. One dawn, after another night of him coming home intoxicated, I decided it was time to leave. I packed our bundles, quietly some clothes, documents, a few photos. It was very sad. With the few savings I had hidden, I left with the children before sunrise, leaving behind our house, our dreams, a whole life we had built. I knew he wouldn't accept a separation easily. Beck was no longer that understanding man from before. The whiskey had taken that too. It was sad to have to flee like that, but it was our only chance to start over. That morning we left town. I cried silently, looking out the window with my little boy in my lap and my young daughter beside Minot, just for the love that had ended, but for seeing how drinking can destroy such a good person, such a happy family. Should I have fought harder for my marriage with Beck? It's a question that still hurts my heart even after so many years. I've asked myself this countless times, wondering if there was anything else I could have done. I tried everything, you know. I talked, cried, begged him to quit drinking. I called his brothers to talk, asked for help at church, even suggested rehab. But you know how it is, right? No one quits an addiction if they don't truly want to, and Becco, he had already chosen whiskey as his companion. There were days when he would come home in a good mood, hugging me, playing with the children, saying he would change. But the next day, there he was again at Mr. Juvenal's bar, the sewing money disappearing, the children afraid of their own father. In the end, I had to make the painful decision to leave with my children. We packed our few belongings in the middle of the night and left to start a new life. We ended up in Duluth, Minnesota, my child. Arriving in a big city like that without knowing a single soul, with 2 children and a few bundles of clothes, it wasn't easy. At first, we even slept in a shelter run by nuns that the priest directed us to. I didn't want to return to my parents' house. Can you imagine? Now, a single mother of 2 children, it would be the talk of the century. It was during one of those mornings, going door to door looking for work with my 2 children, that God placed Miss Lavinia in my path. She had a family garment workshop, making clothes for stores. When she saw me with the children, she asked if I knew how to sew. I immediately showed her my hands, calloused from so much working with needle and thread. "Sit at that machine," she said, pointing to an industrial Husqvarna Viking. She gave me a piece of fabric and asked me to make a straight seam. Child, my hands were trembling, but when I started sewing, it was as if the machine were an old friend. I made the most perfect seam of my life. Miss Lavinia was impressed, but when she found out we were sleeping in the shelter, she did more than give me a job. "There's a garage here in the back," she said. "It's not much, but it'll do for you to live in while you get settled." The garage was small, but as the old saying goes, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. It was just one room with no bathroom. We had to use the bathroom at the back of the workshop. At night it was more complicated, so I would leave a bucket in a corner behind a screen that I made with a sheet, so we wouldn't have to go out in the evening dew with the children. Miss Lavinia and her family gave us a small red 2-burner stove and an old but still good double bed. The 3 of us slept close together, which was actually nice in that bone-chilling cold. There was even a small washing machine outside to wash clothes and a clothesline that I stretched between 2 trees in the yard. Bathing was quite an adventure. I would heat water on the little stove, and we would take bucket baths right there behind the screen. In the Duluth winter, it was tough, but we managed. First, I would bathe Archie, then Phoenix, and finally myself. We would throw the water into a drain that was outside. The work at the workshop was demanding. It started early and went until late, but Miss Lavinia's family was wonderful. In the first few days, when she saw my concern about Archie, she told me, "Don't worry, my cousin Briar works at a municipal daycare nearby." The very next day, she had already spoken with her cousin and secured a spot for my little one. It was such a relief. The daycare was 2 blocks from the workshop, so I would drop him off early and pick him up in the late afternoon. Miss Lavinia's daughters would always bring me a small plate of food, saying I was too skinny and needed to eat properly. Phoenix, after school, would come straight to the workshop and do her homework at a small table in the corner, among the fabric scraps. Sometimes she would even help by sorting buttons or basting some simpler pieces. Little by little, we were settling in. You know, my child, there's a Bible passage that reminds me so much of Miss Lavinia. Come to me. She truly embodied those sacred words with her kindness and generosity. And that's exactly what she did when she opened the doors of life to me and my children. Sometimes we don't even notice, but God places true angels in our path. And if you haven't found your angel yet, don't lose heart. Perhaps you yourself can be an angel in someone's life today. The salary from the workshop wasn't much, but we managed. It was enough to do some basic grocery shopping at the end of the month and buy school supplies for the children. Miss Lavinia, always helpful, would arrange some extra sewing work for me to do after hours alterations, hemming, putting in zippers, things like that. Every penny I earned from these little extras, I saved. It was with this saved money that I was able to pay a lawyer to start my divorce proceedings from Flint. Since he had abandoned me while pregnant and disappeared completely, I had grounds to file for divorce based on abandonment, but the process had been dragging on for years in the justice system. You know how it is, right? In those days, it wasn't easy to get a divorce, especially being a woman. I found a lawyer who charged a price I could afford, payable in installments with my extra sewing work. He explained that my case was strong since there were witnesses to the abandonment, and even Phoenix's birth certificate only had my name on it. I didn't want alimony or anything, I just wanted to be free of that surname and that irregular situation. It was a weight I needed to lift off my shoulders to move on with my life. Life was simple but peaceful. The children were doing well in school, I had work, and that garage, even though small, was our home. A year and a bit passed when my divorce was finally granted. Oh, what a relief! Now I was a judicially free woman. Sometimes I would catch myself thinking, it's a good thing it didn't come through when I was with Beck. It would have been even more complicated. Soon after I moved into the garage, Miss Lavinia, always concerned about our future, had me apply to the Hope Housing Initiative, a government program that built affordable housing for low-income families. At the time, it was the only chance for people like me to get their own home. At first, I was skeptical. Miss Lavinia, don't even bother. They'll reject me right away. I'm married without a husband, I said. But she insisted. Nonsense, woman. This takes years on the waiting list. By the time it comes through, your divorce will be final, and you fit the program perfectly. Single mother, 2 children, steady job. I applied without much hope and almost forgot about it until 2 years later. When I received the letter that would change our lives, I had been selected for a little house in the Hope Housing Initiative. It was in a new housing development, a bit far from downtown, but it was ours. The children and I jumped for joy. We jumped and said, "New house, new house, new house." The commotion was so great that all the seamstresses came to see what was happening. It was a small house, but our own 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, and bathroom. Just imagine a bathroom all to ourselves after so long using a bucket at night and taking bucket baths. There was even a small yard where I already imagined planting some flowers and making a little vegetable garden. The development was still under construction, but you could already see it would be a good place to raise children. The payments were very low, calculated according to my salary at the workshop. Miss Lavinia gave me a small raise to help with the payments, saying I deserved it for being so dedicated to my work. Phoenix and Archie couldn't contain their happiness. Finally, they would have a real bedroom. It was a rush to save money to buy the basic furniture. Thank goodness for used furniture stores. The seamstresses even pooled their money to help me buy a new 4-burner stove. Miss Lavinia's oldest daughter, Harlow, gave me an extra refrigerator that she had, and bit by bit, we furnished our little house. Moving day was a celebration. All the seamstresses helped carry our things, which weren't many. When I put the key in the lock for the first time, the tears came down. It was more than a house, it was the realization of a dream, the certainty that all the struggle, all the new beginnings, had been worth it. After that initial excitement of the new house passed, reality gradually set in. You know when you achieve a dream, but challenges you hadn't even thought about come with it? It was like that. In Miss Lavinia's garage, I would open my eyes and already be practically at work. The children had everything nearby. Archie's daycare, Phoenix's school, our whole life was there downtown. Now it was a constant rush. I would wake up while it was still dark at 5 in the morning to have time to get the children ready and catch one of the first buses. It was difficult to get Archie out of the warm bed in that Duluth cold. Phoenix, always my right hand, would get up by herself and help make coffee. The Hope Housing Development was in the middle of nowhere, to tell the truth. Today it's a beautiful neighborhood, but at the time, it was just red earth and a lot of mud. The bus stop was far, about a 15-minute walk. On rainy days, my God in heaven, we would arrive at the workshop looking like we had rolled in the mud. Not to mention that the red earth would turn into slippery soap. You had to see it to believe it. I carried an extra pair of shoes in my bag to change before entering work. The children, poor things, would arrive at school with their socks all dirty. I would hold Archie in one arm. He walked well but was very clingy and would want to be carried now and then. I carried the bag with our lunch boxes in the other arm and still had to keep an eye on Phoenix so she wouldn't slip. If she fell, well, you know. Sometimes the bus would be late or pass by completely full without stopping. On those days, I would arrive late at the workshop, but Miss Lavinia understood. She knew about our sacrifice. At the end of the day, it was the same marathon, but even more tired. Archie would usually fall asleep on the bus, and I would have to carry him in my arms all the way home. But you know something? Even with all this sacrifice, when we arrived at our homier house and I saw the children being able to take a warm bath in our bathroom, sleep in their own little beds, that was priceless. It was hard, but it was our little corner. When I settled in our little Hope Housing home, my thoughts turned to my parents back in our small town. Being a mother myself made me imagine their distress, not knowing exactly where we were. Soon after fleeing from Beck and finding shelter in Miss Lavinia's garage, I sent a letter written on a page from Phoenix's notebook. I needed to let them know where we were, just in case that drunkard decided to look for us back at the ranch. My mother responded sometime later, saying that Beck never showed up, thank goodness, but there was a tone of worry in that letter that only a mother knows how to have. Look at my luck with men. First Flint disappears, then Beck loses himself to whiskey. It sounds like something from a fortune-teller's curse. Now with our own little house, even small and in the middle of nowhere, I decided to write another letter. I wanted them to know that the daughter who had fled had managed to turn things around. I told them every detail: the 2 bedrooms, the bathroom inside the house, my kale in the yard. I imagined my mother's smile reading all that, the pride she would feel. After a few weeks, the answer came in a letter from my father, one of those that when you open it, you already feel the weight of the words. "Mother wasn't well at all," he wrote. "She coughed day and night without stopping, one of those dry coughs that seem to tear out your soul. She needed to come to the big city to do some tests that weren't available in our small town." The paper had some stains that smudged the letters. I knew they were tears from my old man. When she arrived at the bus station, I almost didn't recognize her. Where was that strong woman who carried water buckets on her head and still found joy in life? She was thin, yellowish, with a cough that gave no rest. I brought her straight to our small houses mall, but still had room for a mother's love. It was only 4 months. 4 months that seemed like 4 centuries of suffering. Hospital, doctor, medicine, that never ended. The diagnosis fell like a stone. Lung cancer. One of those fierce ones that don't forgive. All because of those cursed cigarettes that she and father had been smoking since I could remember. Back in the country, it was like that everyone smoked that strong rope tobacco. No one knew the harm it did. On one of her last good days, when the morphine gave a respite from the pain, she sat at the door of the house, watching the children playing in the yard, my little plants that were already beginning to bloom, the printed cotton curtain that I had made myself. "You made it, my daughter," she said with that weak smile that I still keep in my heart. It was the last time I saw my mother smile. When my mother passed away, she took a piece of my heart with her. There was so much I still wanted to tell her, so much time I wanted to recover. But life doesn't wait for us to be ready to say goodbye, does it? My father became so lonely that it hurt to see. I invited him to live with us, but that stubborn old man wouldn't accept it for anything. "From this ranch, I'll only leave for the grave," he said with that stubbornness of a country man. It was his way of keeping the memory of my mother alive. Every corner of that ranch had a little piece of her. They had lived together for almost 50 years. Between my siblings and me, we spent even what we didn't have to give our mother a decent funeral. I had some money saved in a little box well hidden. I learned from my mother that a woman must have her little money saved. That's where the money for the children's school supplies came from, for shoes when needed, for emergencies. I dreamed of buying a sewing machine like the one I had in Beck's time, but I had to wait. 6 years passed in the blink of an eye, the time I needed to realize my dream and buy my own sewing machine. And it didn't stop there. I needed to buy an overlock machine too. It was a fortune, more than I can tell you, but worth every penny. By this time, my Phoenix was already 15 years old, a responsible and studious young woman. I always thank God for her, so different from me, that silly girl whose father forced her to marry an unreliable man. But then again, I can't complain. If it weren't for what I went through, I wouldn't have my blessed girl. It was Phoenix who had the idea to transform part of the house into a studio. Imagine that, my daughter with that good head for business. We hired a mason to open a door at the front of the house facing the street, and there went my bedroom, turned into a studio. We squeezed the 3 of us into 1 bedroom, a bunk bed for Archie and Phoenix, and my bed against the wall. You could barely walk in there. The Hope housing neighborhood was already friendly by this time. It was so good to go out on the street and greet everyone. There, nobody cared if I was a single mother. On the contrary, they saw me as a winner, a supermom who raised 2 children alone. At the beginning of the studio, I worked only on weekends. It became very demanding to work at the workshop. The children had changed to a new school that they had built near our house, and even though Phoenix was responsible, my mother's heart worried about leaving them alone. After much thought, I took courage and decided to leave the workshop. But I couldn't leave Miss Lavinia in the lurch, could I? That woman who had been an angel in our lives. I proposed to continue sewing for the workshop, but from home. She not only accepted, but gave me a huge kit of threads of all colors to start with. It was a blessing. I no longer had to take that crowded bus every day. I could give more attention to my children, make a fresh lunch. It was a joy to see the children coming home from school and finding their mother at home, the smell of food on the stove, being able to sit together for lunch, help with school assignments. That little piece of paradise was ours. I felt fulfilled watching my family grow and prosper under that roof that we had conquered with so much sacrifice. I needed to organize every penny even more carefully. Every month, I would take a little notebook and write down everything. I couldn't let anything slip by. First, I would set aside the money for the Hope housing payment, which was sacred. Then came the electric bill, the water bill, and every 4 months or so, I had to buy propane gas. What remained, I divided very carefully. Part for the weekly groceries. I always went at the end of the day when things were cheaper. I bought plenty of vegetables and greens, which besides being cheaper than meat, were healthier. Red meat only on Sundays, and even then, not always. When I bought a pound of ground beef, I would mix it with vegetables to make it go further, making a sauce with carrots, potatoes, zucchini, chayote, whatever I had. Chicken was more affordable, so we could have it more often during the week. I would buy a whole chicken and prepare it in all kinds of ways: stewed, fried, boiled. Pork was also a lifesaver. It was always cheaper than beef. With a piece of pork shoulder, I could work wonder sautéed with potatoes, in sauce, all well seasoned. Nobody complained. The secret was to vary things so no one got tired of eating the same thing. Years passed working at home as an employee of the workshop until one day I received news that broke my heart. Miss Lavinia had suffered a stroke and passed away. It all happened very quickly. She was there chatting with the seamstresses, laughing as always, when suddenly they rushed her to the hospital, but she arrived lifeless. Our house went into mourning. After all, she was the one who extended her hand to us when we needed it most, who gave us shelter in that garage, who trusted in me when I had nothing but the willingness to work. At the funeral, I met many former seamstresses, many with stories similar to mine. She had helped so many people restart their lives. Her oldest daughter, Harlow, took over the workshop. I stayed another half year and decided to work independently in my studio. Harlow called me in to talk and make an agreement for all those years of registered work, almost 20 years. I received a good amount of money. I spent days barely sleeping, thinking about what to do. I could pay off our little house in the Hope Housing Initiative, or fulfill another old dream. Build a real studio in the yard. I ended up choosing the studio. After all, the house payments were low, and I could manage them with my sewing. I hired Mr. Maxwell, a well-known mason in the neighborhood, to do the project. The new studio turned out beautifully, all in masonry, with large windows to let in plenty of natural light, light ceramic flooring that made it easier to see pins when they fell. I bought more modern machines, an industrial straight stitch, a new overlock, and even a machine for invisible hemming. I put in a large mirror of those full-body one-a-sand, a floral screen for clients to change clothes for fittings. It was another level. Phoenix, even after marrying Callum, son of Miss Saren from the Artisan Bakery, continued working with me. She lived nearby, just on the street behind us, and brought my grandchildren to brighten my days. Forrest and Wren grew up among fabric scraps and threads, playing at making doll clothes with leftover pieces of fabric. Our street, which before was just dirt, became the main street of the neighborhood. It seems my studio inspired the neighbors. M's. Darcy opened a fruit store, Mr. Silas set up a bakery, Marlowe inaugurated a beauty salon. Everyone helping each other, recommending each other's businesses, growing together. Even asphalt and bus service were added by the city. My Archie also got married, to Bellamy, the daughter of the neighbors on the Cornera, beautiful, hard-working girl, one of those who woke up early to leave everything in order before going to work. He had gotten a good job at a large aerospace company, Collins Aerospace. He was building a career, already a supervisor, but life sometimes plays tricks on us. He started drinking. First, only on weekends with colleagues. Then every day, just like his father. No matter how much we tried to talk, to advise, it was no use. The drink was stronger. Years passed, and I had rebuilt my life with my children. Then one day, in one of those coincidences that only life prepares, we received a call from someone who knew Beck. we found out that he was hospitalized with cirrhosis at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The years of heavy drinking had finally taken their toll on his body. The children, with those good hearts they have, wanted to visit. They found him finished yellow, swollen like a balloon. The whiskey had taken its toll. I hardly recognized him when they showed me a photo. He cried upon seeing his children, especially Archie, who was his own blood. With tears in his eyes, he asked forgiveness from all of us, expressing deep regret for letting alcohol destroy our family. His body was frail, and his spirit seemed broken. A week later, he passed away, leaving behind a legacy of both love and pain. Seeing Beck in that state was a wake-up call for my Archie. On the day of the funeral, he arrived home determined to change his life. He was admitted to a rehabilitation clinic in Fargo, North Dakota. He fought hard against addiction and won. Today, he has been sober for more than 10 years, thank God. He has 3 beautiful children with Bellamy: Hudson, Sage, and little August, whom we named in honor of his great-grandfather, my daddy. Archie discovered his natural flair for sales early on. He started by selling car parts, eventually opening his own auto parts store. Today, he proudly runs Archer's Custom Automotive, the largest store in the region, with 3 thriving branches. People often joke that he could sell ice to Eskimos. You see, my child, Archie's success was the result of an unexpected twist of fate. Beck had never updated the deed to our old wooden house. It still bore both our names. After his passing, his brothers reached out to me, recognizing me as the co-owner, which allowed me to legally claim and sell the property. The house itself was crumbling, the wood eaten away by time, but the land was worth its weight in gold. That neighborhood, once just a quiet corner, was now surrounded by towering buildings and bustling markets. When I went back to sort out the sale, my heart tightened. Every corner of that house held a piece of our history: the kitchen, where I had cooked his favorite slow-braised brisket; Phoenix's room, still marked with the measurements of her growth. It was like walking through a memory, each step replaying the happiness we once shared, like a film unfolding before me. Tears welled up as I took in the state of the place, the windows shattered, the garden overrun by weeds where the children used to play. I even found a faded piece of the cotton curtain I had sewn myself, swaying gently on the clothesline. I thought about how different everything could have been if Beck hadn't given in to his demons. He was such a handsome, hard-working man. Yet, he died alone in a hospital room, abandoned by his friends at the bar, with no one to hold his hand. That was the hardest part: to see someone who had so much love to give end up like that. I divided the proceeds from the sale between Phoenix and Archie. Not a penny for me, I didn't need it. What Beck couldn't provide in life, at least his death allowed his children to chase their dreams. But you know what? After him, I never wanted to be with another man. I had a few flirtations, even some serious suitors, but my heart had closed to that kind of love. My children, and later my grandchildren, became my focus. Sometimes I wonder if it was the fear of pain again, but I don't think so. I believe I'd already loved enough for a lifetime, even with all the heartache it brought. Looking back, I see how much life has transformed. The frightened woman who once fled with 2 children managed to raise them, create a life of dignity, and watch them grow up and build their own families. The neighborhood that was once nothing more than dirt and weeds has now blossomed into a city within the city. There's everything here now: a bustling market, a health clinic, a new school, and even a park with an outdoor gym for the elderly to exercise. Life really has a way of changing, doesn't it? At 77 years old, now retired, I still find joy in sewing more for the pleasure it brings than out of necessity. On weekends, the house comes alive with the laughter of my grandchildren, and soon enough, my great-grandchildren will be joining the crowd. As I reflect on the path I've walked, I hope my story can offer a spark of hope to those facing their own struggles. Life isn't always kind, but with determination and faith, we can rise above even the toughest challenges.